Regular season is done, and there's a ton of NFL news. We'll get to head coach firings, and we'll get to a bunch of stuff, including predicting the actual NFL playoffs. But today, and this week, we're celebrating a couple fantasy football icons. Sam Sherman, $2 million later in the week. Today, though, special one. Pete Overzet celebrating his, $212 of winning from Cash Game Week. We'll be parlaying that over onto Underdog to go over the NFL playoffs best ball. How was Cash Game Week? And more importantly, are you looking more forward to drafting these playoff teams?
I am. Underdog was very nice and spun up my own Cash Game King double up contest where half of the people doubled up their money. Someone on Twitter said it was the most boring contest on Underdog of the week. They didn't see the inspiration, but yeah, it's nice, every once in a while to just lock in a small profit, Hayden, instead of chasing, who wants 500,000 or Sam's 2 million when you could just double up 10 into 20.
Yeah, I know you're not in the tax hell that Sam is, and I think that's the big benefit here anyways. So
exactly.
We'll get to drafting some teams, but I think just for a lot of people, NFL playoffs best ball, this is like truly my favorite game to play out there. There's a lot of strategy, and it might seem overwhelming. It's really not that overwhelming. Give us 10 minutes to go through the strategy, and we'll start drafting some teams to kind of show you. But big picture-wise, $25 to enter, $2 million in prizes. The whole goal is to draft a team that can survive all four rounds of the NFL playoffs, starting with the wild card and then ending up in the Super Bowl. You need a quarterback, you need a running back, you need 2 wide receivers / tight ends, and a flex spot. So we'll go over kind of the big picture strategy here first. So, P, what's the big overarching thing? The whole goal of this, if you're not doing this, you've been eliminated. What's that for you?
Yeah, it's so funny because it does kind of pair well with how we think about best ball mania, where it's you got to advance out of round 1. That's very important, but you also have to build a team that can score a lot of points in the week 17 of this contest, which is the Super Bowl. So once again, we're balancing these two things that actually work against each other a ton. And I think knowing the settings of which specific Underdog contest you're in is important. The Gauntlet, only 1 of 6 advance, which is going to be a little harder. In some of these other contests like the Mitten, 2 of 6 advance. So if you're thinking I want to be more into these bye week teams, I really like the Broncos, I really like the Seahawks, that's easier to pull off taking those zeros in a 2 of 6 like the Mitten than it is in the Gauntlet where only 1 of 6 advance.
Yeah, that's really sharp. I think just for the simple version of this, you have to have a full lineup in both phases here. That's the Super Bowl, and you also have to do it for the wild card round. So obviously pay attention to the bye weeks, like Pete mentioned there. Kind of specifically though, we have one flex spot that's kind of open. I always think about this drafting a half PPR Underdog. I look at the projections every single week, and a lot of the times it's the running backs projecting better than the wide receivers. So I do think that not every single time am I trying to build for a running back in that flex spot, but a whole lot of the times I am going kind of like a 2 running backs, 2 receiver builds. Do you kind of agree with that? And then also, how would you kind of map out the tight end / wide receiver spot? Are there any tight ends that you truly do think deserve kind of a wide receiver label here?
Yeah, you do really quickly realize how tight ends stack up against wide receivers when they're all lumped in together, as opposed to having the value of a replacement player that sometimes those elite tight ends can give you. But yeah, I think when you just generally look at the player pool, those running backs in the mid-range, so guys like Josh Jacobs, Omarion Hampton, Woody Marks, they are such better picks than the equivalent 2v2s of the later running backs versus earlier wide receivers. Because late in these drafts, you can get Luther Burden, you can get Brian Thomas, you can get wide receivers, DK Metcalf, obviously now free, Tetairoa, McMillan free. You can get these guys who can put up big scores, and the running backs back there, there's a Kyle Manung guy, but for the most part, you're just not getting elite workload. So yeah, you definitely want to get that running back firepower early.
And I also think that the wide receiver / tight end spot's great to kind of correlate with the quarterbacks late in the draft. So I do agree, kind of get quarterbacks and running backs up top. Obviously, if you have an elite wide receiver, that's awesome. But then kind of your last couple picks can definitely be some of these wide receivers. The other question here is you can just, draft Josh Allen and he runs the table all the way to the Super Bowl, and you could have one quarterback. There are ways that does work. Typically, I kind of like 2 quarterbacks or 3 quarterbacks sometimes, kind of really depending on that. But how would you kind of go with how many quarterbacks you're going to start with early in the drafts?
For sure. Yeah, I'm with you. Even when you have Allen or Jalen Hurts, it's like, yeah, the thesis is that they can put up big games, but we know how these games go, right? Especially when you have a Barkley or a James Cook, where it's like, oh, it's the Barkley game, it's the Cook game, and Jalen Hurts scores 17 points, and it's like, well, guess what? It's the teams who had Allen with Barkley that happened to advance or something like that. That combo is actually really hard to get, but you get my point. And so, yeah, I'm generally 2 quarterbacks. Obviously, if you have Bo Nix or Sam Darnold, it's mandatory to have a second quarterback. But yeah, I think about the points that get added to your roster and how cheap some of these quarterbacks are. It's like, are you going to take a third string, wide receiver 3 or whatever? Or are you going to just take Jordan Love's points in that spot? So yeah, I find myself to 2 quarterbacks on most of my teams.
Yeah, I see the same way. And also there's like a little bit of a benefit there where you're kind of hoping that your second quarterback goes crazy in the first couple rounds and your like elite quarterback is kind of quiet and then goes crazy because it'd be a little bit harder for the other teams to advance, like that big Josh Allen team. So I always think 2 quarterbacks. Typically I'm like 4 running backs, 2 or 4 receivers. Sometimes there'll be only 3 running backs and 5 receivers, but I almost always at least 2 quarterbacks there. I think like the bigger part of this, not the roster construction, it's, like the team construction. So obviously you need an AFC component and you need an NFC component. Obviously there's some simulations where if you just have 5 players from one team, you could win it. I think that's a little bit less likely and there's not like a real upside to play for that. I think you're going to want a component from each conference here. Do you like to stack like 2 teams together or 3 teams, like one like kind of powerhouse team in the AFC with 2 NFC counterparts, or you just like, I want the 2 big dogs from AFC, NFC, and I'm going to tack on some of these kind of like lower projected players on those teams?
I think like if I could just have like my perfect draft and I told everyone to just, they had to leave guys for me within reason. Obviously you take all the best players, but it'd be like, I would love like 5 players from a high powered AFC team and 5 players from an NFC. So maybe like a good example would be like, give me the 5 main Niners guys and the 5 main Jags guys. And I just get like these loaded things. That doesn't happen. In some drafts, maybe it will perfectly come together, some of the cheaper teams you can, but that's kind of what I'm starting with. And then what do they always say? It's like, well, do you have a plan once you get punched in the mouth? And then you're kind of balancing those 2 things we talked about where it's like, yes, I want the team level correlation because I'm making a bet on this team. I want them to go far. But if you swing too far in that direction, you start adding Khalil Shakur, Dalton Kincaid. It's like, okay, that's cool if they make it to the Super Bowl. You'll be very excited to have those guys. How are they going to go 1 of 6? How are they going to go 1 of 6 in back-to-back pods? That's going to be really tough. So to me, it's like this balancing act of grab my pieces that correlate. But if I'm swinging too far in that direction, boom, I need a guy who's just going to put up 15, 20 points just to advance this team. So those are the kind of things I think we're always wrestling with.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same way. I kind of like to have one team where like this is like the team I really need, and then I usually like to have 2 outs on the other side. So like let's say it's like the Patriots. I'll take 4 Patriots. Obviously, like that's going to require Drake May. You pick a running back, you pick a wide receiver, a combination of them, and then I want like 2 NFC teams where I have to have the Patriots. That's a requirement for this team to make the Super Bowl, and then I have kind of 2 outs, and I think that kind of helps you just like as you're getting later on, you're not getting sniped on like the one guy you absolutely needed to fall to you, and like now this team's dead. Now you actually have a couple outs. So I always kind of like picture 3 teams, sometimes a 4th team in there, and obviously you have to kind of play with the bye weeks. I didn't want to like make this kind of easier, and I just built like a cheat sheet of if you have players in the early rounds on these teams, these are the teams you also want to stack with. So like for example here, the Seahawks, you want to pair the Seahawks with the Patriots who are on the NFC or the AFC side of that, Jaguars, Bills, and then the Broncos. But I put the Broncos last because that'd be both of the 1 seeds. And then on the like within the conference, you want to look at the Bears and the Eagles because the way that the bracket works and reseeding works, those teams wouldn't play each other in the same conference until way later on when a lot of teams have kind of been eliminated. So this is kind of the cheat sheet. I think Pete and I will use some of these teams in this kind of like this order here. By the way, this order is just all listed based off of the odds to win the Super Bowl. So I think we want to keep this in mind, but 3 teams, we have the right roster construction here and really just being very disciplined once you click into the draft there. How do you use the queue here on this? That's like one thing I wanted to mention is like, I'm always just like firing up the queue. So if I have like Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm just going immediately. I'm searching Seahawks. I'm putting Sam Darnold, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet in the queue. Then I'm looking at the AFC teams that need to pair with them. I'm throwing in the Drake Mays and those guys in the queue. Are you kind of like going queue crazy here? Or is this all upstairs for you?
No, I like using the queue as well. I would say, anyone who's drafted, if you draft the dailies, the battle royale, if you draft best ball mania, people stick pretty close to ADP. So you can really kind of gauge like, oh, this guy should be here.
Yep.
That is not the case for playoff best ball. I mean, people go rogue. People are trying to get team stacks. And so you think about it as you start to draft, all of a sudden, like say you go Patriots guys, right? All of a sudden, like the Chargers don't really even mean anything to you because you're playing the Chargers or the Patriots to win. So all of a sudden your draft board is different. And so that's what you're kind of trying to balance again here too, is like, I want to get values on these guys, but I also have to realize there are teams that multiple drafters would potentially covet. And you'll see like with the Rams, with the Patriots, there might be 3 different teams with those guys through a few rounds. So no one's safe. Like you can't think, oh, I'll push Hunter Henry. No. The Ramondre guy might want him just as much as the Drake May drafter. And so that's the other thing of, I always use the phrase squatter rights. Like if you draft JSN and then you come and draft Kenneth Walker, you're probably not going to have someone going rogue and taking Sharps and Darnold. In that case, I'll push it. But with some of those more premium teams, like everyone feels great about the Rams, rightfully so. Like, don't wait on those guys. You star them up and you go get them because the team thesis falls apart if you don't land it.
Yeah, this is a way different than when we're talking about like staying pretty close to ADP in regular best ball. This is like, it's just such a different formula that it takes to win this. I use ADP if you can push it, awesome. But up top, if like I think I need this quarterback to make this team look all right, I'm reaching around. It really doesn't matter down there. So with that, let's go over to the lobby and start drafting some teams. All right, draft is about to fill here. Just Pete, just in general, like the first round, there's obviously like the top 6, top 7. They're always just gonna be going in the first round. Like, do you have a preference? Are you ever reaching in the first round here? Like, how do we start this party off?
Yeah, this is fun. And this is the same for any kind of drafting you do. Like if you're just doing 1 or 2 teams and you have a take on who's going to be in the Super Bowl, like go build the best version of that. If you're drafting a lot of these teams, I like to be a little more humble. Like I don't want to be like, oh, CMC against the Eagles. Like what if they get bounced, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know. I'm going to, build teams where the Niners go on a roll. I'm going to build teams where the Seahawks and stuff. Yep. So I would let volume kind of dictate that. But I will say this round 1 outside of Puka, I would say is like shakier than it's ever been. I mean, tough matchup for CMC. JSN doesn't play round 1. Josh Allen is 1-point road favorites against a really, really good Jags team. And so I think you can start to poke holes in basically all of these guys.
Yeah, I see it the same way. That's just the whole NFL playoffs this year. It's just like such a flat tier. I was looking at the odds to win the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks are the favorite, but only at 17% to win it. And the Rams, who are going to be playing a game or 2 on the road here to start, they're second at only 16%. So like this is like the year where if you wanted to sell me that it's Jaguars versus the Bears, like this would be the year where I can sell that. And typically it's like, all right, are these AFC teams really going to beat Mahomes and Lamar and Josh Allen? Typically not, but this year is anything's possible.
So what would you like to do here? Generally, obviously by ADP, CMC goes, but if you have another angle you think might be fun to build out.
I kind of like the Seahawks here. Yeah, I think that it's kind of challenging to build teams with buys because I think there's probably some teams that just like don't understand the landscape of it. So I do think that the best teams in theory would be the teams that are on the buy and just building through those properly. So the Seahawks, like odds to make the Super Bowl is just a lot easier because they're not having to deal with that first round buy. And then also we can kind of scroll all the way down here. We can still find a bunch of Chargers that project well in the first round. Tetairoa, McMillan on the Panthers and stuff. You kind of build teams around this way. But I think that JSN's like been such a rock star at wide receiver and has a really tough position to kind of like compare to. If you don't have JSN, like if it's JSN and the Bills, for example, man, it's gonna be really hard to win that thing if you don't have if you don't have JSN, because the other wide receivers are just like not going to project very well at all.
And then I think the big question for us is like, we know we're going to want Darnold with JSN, and then we're probably choosing between Sharps or Kenneth Walker, because after that, like more than if we have 4 players on bye, it starts to get really dicey. So I'm thinking we probably have the running back, the alpha wide receiver, and the QB.
Yep. Yeah, I see it the same exact way. So yeah, I'm looking at any of the AFC guys would make sense to me. If you want to do Patriots, like I think Travion would make some sense. If you want to do Travis Etienne, that's cool with me. I think all like projection wise, they're all about the same to me though.
I like the idea of Etienne because it gives us still outs to get the quarterback. Obviously, we're going to have 2 quarterbacks with Darnold being on bye. So just having the Etienne Lawrence thing, and that's one thing we can talk about a little bit after we make this pick. This would be a spot where I don't think we need to take Seattle or Jacksonville. We could grab an advance rate piece, like someone we feel really good about helping us get out of this gauntlet.
Yeah, Nico Collins, I think, would also be another good one. There's a chance that we can build a CG Stroud team. I also think the Texans should beat the Steelers. So you might get like 2 weeks of this. So and just like more optionality here. So we don't have to like pick which AFC route we're going to go with, but now we have 3 options here.
I love this. Like I was doing the stream on my channel earlier and I was like, the 2 AFC dark horses that I feel the best about, and you look at the playoff odds, it would be the Texans and the Jags. And then that pairs up so nicely with the Seahawks because one, at least with the Jags, they should score a ton of points if they win. And on top of it, like the pieces are pretty cheap. Once we get Etienne, once we get Nico, there shouldn't be a lot of other competition for Texans and Jags.
Yeah, and the other thing is Jacksonville and Houston, if they both win in the first round, they're not going to face each other. So we're most likely going to get another one of these guys even into the conference championships. Like that's another way to kind of like break ties is like make sure that your teams aren't going to like immediately face each other in the divisional round, start kind of chopping your team off a little bit earlier. It's really nice if your 2 teams from the same conference can actually make it to the conference championship. It's not a requirement, but that's obviously really nice to pull off.
And because of that, like the other kind of thing I like to think about is I really like pairing the quarterback and running back from teams I want to go far, because you think about how your lineup is going to dwindle, you're going to lose teams, but you're going to need those running back and quarterback points. And so having those pairings is really nice. Are you team Walker or team Sharps on Seattle stuff?
I mean, I'm such a donkey. I've been on Team Kenneth Walker, and I think I'm just going to keep riding it. But it's about the same. Like the reality is, like the projections are about the same. I do think you could double up because I think there's a chance that they would both kind of ping pong weeks here. But I think Kenneth Walker is the clear play for us.
Yep. So now we know we've like earmarked. We'll do the queue here and make sure we won't forget about Darnold. I wonder if we should lock up Lawrence here because. I guess we'd still have Stroud, but I do like the idea of Lawrence.
Yeah, I think Lawrence is great. He's going to project better than Stroud early on top of it. If we wanted to do 3 quarterbacks with Darnold, Lawrence, Stroud, I don't think that's absolutely crazy at the very end here. But yeah, I'm looking at our team. I think we project pretty well right now with Trevor Lawrence, Kenneth Walker, and Etienne and Nico Collins, even though we don't have JSN in the wildcard round. So our next 4 picks, like being specifically for the wildcard round, I think is a good balance if you do start with JSN.
And I would say a guy I immediately start thinking about on this team, knowing we're not going to have Walker. And, there's a really good chance, I think in this version, because Lawrence is going to be our only quarterback, we really need the alpha game from Lawrence. Maybe that pulls away a little bit from Etienne this week. So I'm starting to think about Woody Marks or another piece. It could even be a Josh Jacobs or something that gives us the running back firepower we need in the wild card round.
Yeah, I think that goes to the discussion of I always just am treating that flex spot mostly as a running back spot because of the projection. So whoever's kind of like the best wild card piece, and then we have 3 strong running backs. I think that's a good spot. So I like still earmark Sam Darnold. I think I definitely want on this team. And then definitely a strong running back here. And then kind of how we talked about this, the last couple picks, like that's our dart throws at wide receiver / tight end. We build it through correlation. The projections are pretty bad down there anyway. So I would rather just like build it through correlation. And I'm focused on like the projected points early on and then kind of finish it off with some correlation at the end.
Yeah, and this is where it's fun too to, pay attention to what your opponents are doing, and you can kind of tell who's staying in their lane, building out their teams, who might be going a little rogue, grabbing a bunch of one-offs. Like this team in the one hole has, since the Puka Stafford has gone kind of rogue with the selections, whereas this J.R. Smith has all Eagles and Jags there before they took Metcalf as an advance piece. So that's one where if we are trying to get Jags, we know we're competing with him for those.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, I think this is the point where we can grab a Woody Marks, we can grab a DeAndre Swift. I think is totally fine here too. I would probably go Woody Marks, like you have there, and then I think we would discuss: do we want a Jacksonville wide receiver or Sam Darnold at this spot? I think you can kind of go either way. I think Sam Darnold would likely come back to us because there's not other teams that have been building with Seattle, but is it worth the squeeze?
I'd ask you this. How do you feel about like Parker Washington versus Brenton Strange? Because that would be kind of our consolation.
Yeah. I don't think there's much of a drop off. So this is where I think I would go with Sam Darnold, because I would feel very good about our team with Sam Darnold, and with Jacksonville, Brenton Strange, Brian Thomas. I mean, all these Jacksonville guys, it's all about the same. And like, we don't even have to do that. Like, worst case, if it's just kind of Sam Darnold or Trevor Lawrence kind of carrying us, then maybe we're the Cooper Kupp and Rashid Shaheed and AJ Barner team.
Yeah, and I think it's smart because even though we do have squatters' rights with Walker and JSN, you could easily see someone who's built up a really highly projecting round 1 team be like, you know what? Sharbs is here in Darnold. Let me go Sharbs, Darnold, Rashid Shaheed. That's a really nice back stack. Yep. And then we're like, shit, the entire thing we were building around is gone.
Yeah, and that's why I just think the quarterback's so hard to kind of replace their projection, because those guys are going to be projected for 19 points. The wide receiver that you took in the 10th round or 9th round are projected for, 7-8 points. So, like, really, do you want to risk like the difference of a point or two at wide receiver for like the difference of not having a second quarterback is going to cost you like multiple points each round. So I always think I'm paying the price for the quarterbacks just because they project so much better than the wide receivers. So I think it's a perfect start, really.
Yeah, and so we have 3 more picks. We're good at quarterback. We have, I think, wide receiver firepower is what we really need in round 1, since we're going to put a lot on Nico. And then the decision becomes, obviously, we're going to try to grab Parker Washington, and it's kind of like, do we want to get an advance rate piece? Maybe a guy like Tetairoa, DK Metcalf already went, or do we be like, let's grab Higgins and just say like the Texans wide receivers are able to get it done,
Yeah, I'm also looking at Charbonnet, where it sounds kind of crazy, but I do think that 4 running backs is totally fine. We'd be pretty thin at wide receiver, and we'd have to nail definitely a Jacksonville guy. So I think we'd start with Parker Washington here, because we definitely want a Jaguar. I do think that Charbonnet does make some sense on this team for looking at that flex spot. Now, you might tell me that's too much, emphasis on or not having enough firepower for the wild card round. He went anyways, but I think he was in consideration.
The other advanced piece you could talk me into is you play like Lad here to get a really high scoring round 1 score. Cause I do think we're still kind of thin. We go Lad, and then we could figure out maybe another Houston or Jacksonville piece to finish it off.
Yeah. Lad would be in there. I think DJ Moore and Ricky Pearsall are definitely good projection plays, Colson, Loveland, and Brenton Strange still. So all these guys, the reality is their projections are about the same. So I would just always just be leaning in towards the correlation when you can. And then because we went with a bye week team here, Lad McConkey in round 1 definitely makes sense.
And one kind of fun way to think through things too is yes, we're kind of drafting Lad as an advance rate piece, but in this reality where we have no Patriots, we would love for them to upset the Patriots. Not only does that give Lad an extra game, it makes the Jacksonville path a lot easier to the Super Bowl, because now one of the best teams in the AFC is also out of the picture. So that if then thinking can be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we could do Quentin Johnson, that we can build an actual Super Bowl team if the Chargers somehow made it. So that's another way where is the Seahawks Chargers likely? Absolutely not. If this team snuck in, we would be massive favorites for that. So Quentin Johnson, Brenton Strange, Jaden Higgins, also another great one here. So this is where the Lad McConkey opens up another potential team to make a full Super Bowl roster.
And this is what I would say in this spot, and I'm curious how you forecast these guys, where it's if you told me all of these guys were projected equally, I would rank it Strange because Jacksonville is our main big stack, Higgins because we already have 2 Texans, and then QJ. But if you told me, I think round 1, one of these guys is going to project 2-3 points better, I'm let's tilt in that direction. So you could talk me into any of these. Which ones do you think makes the most sense?
Well, how many potential Super Bowl teams can we thought? Let's assume it's the Seahawks on the other side. So we have, obviously, if it's Jacksonville, we're set there. If Houston makes it, we have a full lineup there. And then, but if the Chargers made it, we would not.
But if we take QJ, we would.
But if we took QJ, we would. So this is one where I think if in the crazy scenario, the 1 in 1,000 chance it does end up being these 2 teams, I do think that difference would make a big enough difference there. Now, Brenton Strange, I do think would make a lot of sense in the other outcomes.
And I do think just pure projection, I am guessing QJ is going to project the best of those 3. And even if from a median, he doesn't, I think you would argue he has by far the biggest ceiling of those 3.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the complicated part of all that. So you can probably break that down in a couple different ways there, those last couple picks. But when we hit on the high projected player at wide receiver early in JSN there, you're kind of competing for just one spot. We got to piece together like those last 4 guys. Like they're kind of competing for one spot where the money matters. So I prefer building with the quarterbacks and running backs early on, like we did in this build.
And I should mention, people who draft a bunch of best ball teams are familiar with this, but you can name your Gauntlet team. So like, I'm going to name this Pete and Hayden here. But if you want to name them with your various stacks and stuff like that, it's kind of fun when you're sweating them over the weekend and you just know immediately what other pieces are on it. So take advantage of that.
Yep. I named my team that took down, we can enter another one that took down the employees only. I'm not allowed to draft against you guys. I'm allowed to draft against our employees. And I named my team as 4 running backs. But if you looked at the running backs, one of them was McMillan. So when I named it, I thought I was getting a 4th running back. Turns out it was a 3 running back build. But if they all stay healthy, then you can run it.
What of my best, I named all 150 of my BBM teams off of, the day in which stream I did them on. And one of my best teams was labeled "Do Not Discuss," which just shows you how much, like the one team that disgusted me at the time ended up being one of the best teams.
Yep. Do you have like any big picture takeaways from like best ball, like results based, like are the ADPs accurate? Did it feel sharper? Was there any like kind of big takeaways? I think I'm going to build more 3 quarterbacks. Any like big picture stuff for regular best ball?
I think like the biggest, and we never want to overfit or over index on like the winning BBM team because, there's a lot that goes right for that. But just this idea of balancing the yin and the yang of players like Luther Burden with more boring players like Derrick Henry, who wasn't a sexy round 2 player. Yep. I wrote up in the Fantasy Life newsletter too, where I was like, for all the Javonte Williams of the world, you also need the Harold Fannons. But if you have too many Harold Fannons and not enough Javontes, like it's finding that perfect alchemy is really what you need to build these teams that can accomplish the goals of like, hey, all of those early Javonte points helped you advance. Then he petered out, and then you need the younger players to really take over for that. So to me, it's just that like balancing these ideas, which really stuck with me.
Yeah, and I think that maybe a couple years ago when the rookies were like so just mispriced, then you could have just been like, I'm just doing a bunch of rookies because on average they're going to like really pay off. Now that the rookies are like priced like largely like where they should be, and like maybe you can make an argument even too much. I do think you need to like kind of more pick your spots with some of these rookies out there. So like Luther Burden was the perfect example where probably was not worth it for the first 14 weeks, but you paired him with the right wide receivers early on around him, some of the old veterans, then he goes crazy. I do think that yin and yang is like absolutely true. I'll throw out like 3. I think 3 quarterbacks is like definitely
having those different stacks. And I mean, this year too was so chaotic with injuries and backups that it's like looking at one quarterback teams. One of my best teams was like a Hurts Penix, and it's just like, man, sitting there with the one quarterback really stings.
Yep. All right.
Oh, okay. I was like, are we gonna get funneled to a JSN again? You want to do CMC this time?
Yeah, CMC or Josh Allen. I think those are the clear top 2. I'm surprised Saquon Barkley's 4th. Like you guys are gonna have to sell me on like why that's the case.
I'm with you in that, like, I'm just so spooked on Barkley. Like structurally, the fact you can reliably draft the Barkley, Hurts, AJB, Devonta Goddard. Sure. Like if you think the Eagles are going on a run, like you can draft that. And in that scenario, because the RB2 isn't attractive there, like I want Barkley on those teams. But outside of that context, like one-off Barkley or Barkley with even one other Eagle, like it feels very gross to me.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, they have like pretty good chances of making the Super Bowl, but it's not like it was previously. And then on top of it, his like just regular projections are just way down versus where they otherwise would be. So yeah, like to me, like Josh Allen would definitely be ahead. I think that Drake May like should also be maybe a little bit higher than he is out there. So those are kind of I think Devontae Adams is another great one. Kyron, those 2 guys, I think all deserve like a lot of love. Maybe I think I would draft all of them over Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, and this drafter gets the Allen Cook. I've only gotten it once across all of my drafts so far. May does go, which is a bummer because that would have been a fun faller there. We could do the Kittle. We could build out something on the AFC side again. What do you think?
So with the 49ers, Broncos, Patriots, Jaguars, Bills, Texans from the AFC, and then Seahawks and Rams. It's hard to do Stafford. So yeah, I think Kittle would make sense. I think Etienne would make some sense. I think those would be the top ones.
Yeah, let's go ahead. It goes back to maybe that squatters' rights thing of maybe someone gets a little frisky with Kittle, and then we're competing for Purdy with someone, and that starts to get a little messy. So I do like getting the CMC Kittle stuff together.
Yeah, that was just kind of like a dead spot in the draft where I think the clear top guys went just ahead of us, and like there's not an obvious pairing here. So the 49ers offense is good enough where if it gets really hot, well, first of all, like when they get eliminated, most likely they're going to put up a bunch of points. Like I think last week was the exception to that. Every other week they've just been dominating. So even if this team does get chopped a little bit early, we should be able to survive.
Would you like to play the Henderson angle here? You could also play the RJ Harvey if you want to do the other bye week team we haven't explored yet. What do you think?
I do think Henderson and Diggs would make some. Yeah, I actually like RJ Harvey a lot.
Let's try that out.
Yeah, let's try the RJ Harvey stuff.
Yeah, we'll do that can be the theme here, is making the bye week teams work, because it's actually pretty comparable. It's like Harvey Sutton, obviously the Seahawks are more expensive with JSN, but it's like if you get Harvey Sutton, no one's really going to be fighting you for anything else.
Yeah, and I think obviously we're going to get Purdy, Nix as our two quarterbacks, and maybe if we feel necessary, we can go with a third one there. But the Broncos guys are going to be very cheap, and like we said, I think that teams are not going to draft Broncos correctly, or that the Broncos and the Seahawks are the two teams that people mess up their drafts the most, and they have great odds to make the Super Bowl. So I do think, in general, I like to build through those teams. Just do it right. So
the drafter behind us has JSN. We should feel pretty confident they're not going to mess around with Broncos stuff. Right. What order do you think we lock up Purdy and then try to get Sutton on the wrap? We'll also have to kind of decide between probably Sutton and Jennings, but if we take Purdy, we should be okay to have Jennings fall, I'd hope.
Yeah, I kind of trust the guys behind us because we got like a Ram stack. I'm almost like interested in doing, Sutton. I think Sutton's pretty key because I just don't really trust the other Broncos pass catchers very much.
Yeah, you're right. It would basically, there's a small chance this drafter, but with Etienne, they should really go Lawrence. Yeah. And this is what makes these drafts so fun. It's like you could assume your opponents are going to be semi-rational, but you just never know.
Yeah, I mean, they got badges, so that's going to help us out a little bit. And then I also think that it's okay to draft some teams that are going to be dead, but if they would have fell your way in the draft, like it's worth the kind of burning, like, so if you're drafting 100 teams, burning 10 of them because you're hoping to get one last guy to follow you to make that team like really, really good. I do think that's kind of a trade-off that you need to be okay with.
For sure. And I do think this is going to break pretty nicely for us here based on these Lawrence and Diggs picks for us to lock up Brock, because that becomes really the piece that makes this work, because we need that round one quarterback.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I think that this would be a team where we could think about doing a third quarterback, like very last round, but we'll get to that if we get to it.
Yeah. And we'll get to kind of talk through again. How do we get this team to advance if we have 3 bye week players? But obviously with McCaffrey and Kittle, we're off to a good start there. But this could be a team where we do like maybe get into some Steelers or, Tetairoa or some of these guys who project really well.
Yep, completely agree. All right, broke our way.
All right, let's do it. We get Brock, CMC, RJ Harvey, George Kittle, Courtland, Sutton. What's your official Super Bowl prediction right now?
I kind of got the Seahawks and Broncos, which sounds like it's like kind of a favorite, but it's almost contrarian because like I feel like nobody really believes in those 1 seeds. But I just think like going into Denver with that defense, I do think that there's something there. Sean Payton kind of game planning. The rest of the AFC is going to be beating up on each other, and then you're going to have to catch the Broncos in the altitude, and then maybe it's snowing up there. You never know. And then I think with the Seahawks, I don't know. They just feel like the best team. I think very clearly the Rams and the Seahawks are the 2 best teams in football. The Rams just have to win on the road, and they have to make sure that they win the first round stuff, things that the Seahawks don't have to do. So I think I'm going to go with the chalk and actually go with the 1 seeds there, but any of these teams can go on a run. I also still think the Eagles could go on a run. Like they're a team that's just like so scrutinized, but it's like, dude, they got so many superstars, and like they're really well coached on defense. And like you have to stop AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and if the deep ball hits, it's a really tough team to beat.
So we did lose Jennings, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I do think we should make, probably before this guy drafts again, we should get Pearsall just so they're not trying to grab another Niner from us. But this would maybe be the spot where we decide to start up another stack here or team.
Yeah, I think Hampton would be one that I'd be pretty interested in. I think that his projection for next week would be really beneficial to us because we're not going to have the RJ Harvey points. Like, this is where, like, I'm leaning towards Hampton just projects so much better than all of the other wide receivers. So I think that I would rather just like lean into the running back for the flex there. And then if they do pull off an upset over there, I do think Hampton would look really good for the next round as well.
Yeah. And then in that scenario, if the Chargers do win, they would head to Denver, which isn't, quite ideal, but again, not the end of the world when you just got to advance these teams that have bye week players on them.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the running backs are in a weird spot because there's a lot of committee backfields in the playoffs, and Omari and Hampton, like, I guess Kamani Vidal is, but I think once the playoffs get here, it's going to be a lot of Hampton.
So I'll set up the queue here again. What is your thought on, I think losing Ricky Pearsall of all the stuff probably stings the most.
Yeah, how would you break through Nix versus Pearsall? Because I feel like Nix would be pretty key too. Just you have two outs to making the Super Bowl with quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's my thought is: are people going to take naked Bo Nix behind us?
Maybe not. Maybe not. The one team's already got two quarterbacks. The other team, do you trust Cole over there? I'm not sure, but it's up to you.
So this guy definitely is on Packers and Bears, which is an interesting strategy considering they play each other. I went ahead and got us Pearsall just because I do think that's like the last viable Niners piece. And we could still play. So if we have this Brock stuff, right, we can now still have a San Francisco Denver Super Bowl. We can grab that last Chargers wide receiver, and then we'd have the San Francisco Chargers Super Bowl as well.
Yep. And I think that if we just wanted to pivot with, Caleb Williams or Sam Darnold and grab one just pass catcher at the very end, I do think that would be a good consolation out there. So hopefully he falls, and if not, pivot.
Yep. And, one thing that's crazy about these rooms is like, so this team drafting stacks of two teams playing against each other, that team is guaranteed to be dead if it makes it to the finals, just the way that works. But they could score a ton of points if that game's the shootout of the week and be the team that advances. And that's why this game is so sick. But we are going to be able to get Bo Nix here.
Oh, yeah. Good call. Yeah, no, that's a great call right there.
And then two more slots, Hayden. We're doing good. So we're round one. We're going to have Purdy scoring. We're going to have CMC in Hampton. Nice. We're going to have Kittle in Pearsall. We need some more wide receiver ammo here.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially both those guys are playing through injuries right now. So I think that once again, this would be, if you wanted to do the Chargers wide receivers, I think that they would be on the menu here. If we wanted to do, I think that Jaden Reed has some, DK Metcalf has some upside. Tetairoa is a great call. Yeah, I think you're starting all the right guys. We definitely need one of these. I think we're probably good on running backs because it would be CMC's hitting our lineup every single week, no matter what. And then one of Harvey and Hampton to the Super Bowl is I think a pretty decent outcome for us.
Yeah, my thought is probably QJ is the most important, just so we still have that San Francisco Chargers, and then we pick our favorite advance rate wide receiver with that final pick.
Yep. Yeah, is there any element like scrolling down? I don't think it really matters much. Like, the ownership wise for these guys, I think it's like so low on the totem pole. I think it matters a little bit, but.
Yeah, I think maybe with some of like the Patriots are kind of a good example of like if everyone is tacking on Kyle Williams is their last guy and not getting to Demario Douglas just because he's a few spots below, like they project the same, and if one's always going and the other
for sure
not as much, like maybe you tilt it that way a bit.
Yeah, I think that's like the only way that I would make it matter at all.
Yeah, and like that's a good spot. Like if you have an IKB take where you're just like, you know what, like I like Rome, more than DJ Moore. Or I like Pop Douglas more than Kyle Williams. Like flex it there. Like you'll get a little bonus
for sure.
All right, should we lock up QJ again?
Yeah, I think QJ makes some sense. For sure. Yeah, another out to the Super Bowl, and I think he probably just projects nearly the same as the other options there.
Yeah, I like the way he hits too, right? Like when he does hit, it's going to be like a 60-yard touchdown or a couple end zone looks, and that'll play very nicely. Yeah,
so I think the last call would be there's not a good running back. Like, Monungai, I think would be decent to have a Hampton versus Monungai, but I don't think probably worth that because I think that the Ricky Pearsall projection with Kittle is pretty weak, and then even Courtland Sutton's a little bit volatile himself. So
yeah, I mean the fun thing about we were talking about building Super Bowls. I mean we have 4 San Francisco, so if we take a DK Metcalf, and while it seems very far fetched, and the odds would kind of seem like it's far fetched, you still are technically live for a Steelers Niners Super Bowl as well.
Yeah, is there any AFC running backs that we like aside from Hampton, Harvey? Like, is there Tootin? But that's pretty thin. It'd be like Jalen Warren. Like, it's pretty. I think it's too thin.
And I just think with CMC and Hampton, I feel pretty good about our round 1. These 2 guys hitting our lineup, and then it's just like, do we have enough wide receiver firepower here with QJ, Pearsall, Kittle? Like, we basically just need the highest projecting wide receiver with this pick.
Yeah, and these guys are all about the same. I think I would take Tetairoa because I think that he's clearly the advanced play, and we've got bye weeks. So like the Broncos teams, they're drafting somebody else instead of Tetairoa, McMillan, and like to me, it's like Troy Franklin types versus Tetairoa. I think that the Tetairoa side of that makes more sense. I know that you're like getting more equity in the Super Bowl and stuff, but I do think that the odds of like actually advancing all the way through, and then the odd that Troy Franklin's actually separating in a meaningful way, I do think that I would want more bullets out there.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's evolved for me over the years drafting these contests where it's like, this is, if you have the bye week pieces in your head, you're like, oh, give me Troy Franklin late because then I can still build a really strong lineup. But it's like in scenarios where the Broncos go far, aren't the Nix, Harvey, Sutton teams going to be blowing? They're rolling. You actually want the highly projecting late round guys in the bye week guys to be the studs on their team.
Yeah, I see it the same way. And then also when you're looking at it's a 500 person final, but half of those teams, or nearly half of them, are going to be built for the teams that lost in the conference championships too. So while it is 500 teams, the truth is there's only like 200 teams that are actually going to have a full roster for that Super Bowl too. So I wouldn't look at like the final where you have to have every little thing go exactly your way. You can miss out on Troy Franklin outscoring Courtland Sutton by 1.5 points and still have a really good day in the Super Bowl. So that's how I look at it.
For sure.
All right. Do you want to do another one? Is there any big differences to Big Mitten, or should we kind of call it there? It's up to you.
No, I mean, really, it's funny because I was going to say, we kind of talked about it at the top. The difference with the Mitten 2 here is the 2 of 6. So these builds that you just saw us do with Seahawks and Broncos, those are even more viable in this contest. I think it's a really fun exercise to do what we did and be like, how can we walk that tightrope and still make those work if we get Seahawks or Broncos in the Super Bowl? But yeah, if you really like that angle and you say want to tail Hayden on that Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl, go draft a ton of Mitten 2 teams because it'll be just a little bit easier to advance those zeros.
Yeah, and then you can also push the wild card round a little bit there. So like I think that the Tetairoa side and 1v6, I think that if you wanted to do the Troy Franklin side of that on the 2 of 6 side, I do think like that's like where some of those like minor differences would kind of link up.
And one thing too, it's actually the flip too. And this, if you guys haven't ever noticed this, when you click on the tournament cards, it shows the advancement structure underneath it. The Gauntlet is 1 of 6, which is harder than the Mitten 2, but then it's 1 of 6 in the divisional round, 1 of 5 in the conference championship. That's a lot more doable. It flips with the Mitten where it goes 1 of 10, 1 of 10. Yeah. So in this one, you're actually trying to think, how do I have the nuts in the divisional round? And so then having loaded Broncos and Seahawks teams really comes to your advantage.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. So those are like the small differences building this. But I think in general, if you have like the right roster construction, I think 2 quarterbacks, 3 or 4 running backs, and then the rest to the wide receivers. If you're picking 2 teams from one conference, a loaded team from the other conference, like you're so far ahead of everybody else drafting here. So I think those are the basics. And then if you want to really study things on how reseeding works and these little differences, I think like that's how you like completely become an expert with it. But this is the game. If you really study this one, I do think this is the one where I think your edge is going to be realized the fastest here, because I do think there's a lot of teams that are quite frankly dead. So with that, is there any written work that you have for this, other streams that you've got going, Pete? I know you're always grinding out there. So what do you have on the docket?
Yeah, just on Monday I recorded a live stream. You referenced it with Leone and Pat Carrain, and so kind of getting the lay of the land. And then I'm going to do one Wednesday afternoon with the Badge Bros on my channel as well, doing another playoff best ball preview. So yeah, lots of streams there. I don't think I'm going to have anything written. I'll let you take care of that for us.
I'm trying to get away with the writing stuff, and then the numbers come back and it's doing well on Reddit, and then the bosses want me to write more. So it's like,
there you go.
I'm hoping the views go down enough where I can just do the streams, but I guess I have to write again. So use promo code Pete, promo code the show. Hopefully you're already on the app out there. I'll go over actual like NFL playoffs takes. So like this was about the structure of it. I'll go into the details, teams I like, teams I don't like, players I think are going to really kind of pop off here as we get the right matchups in. So a lot more content coming on the channel, even with Josh out of the way. Sam Sherman, stay tuned. Fantasy Sickos. That's going to be a good one at the end of the week. So let's get us out of here. I'll see you guys tomorrow.